this is working. So this time, what I wanted to think about was how to get movement, not movement, but like input working in the game. So last time I got a piece coming from the top to the bottom, which was pretty good. And now let's see how we could get the input so that we can rotate the piece, right? Like we need input to rotate the piece. And the tricky thing is we have multiple platforms. So we have touch, we have keyboard, and we have gamepads. So how do we handle this in the game? And my first idea would be to kind of have like an intermediary layer where everything is piped through a central place. So we would have in the scene, we would have a method that handles touches. We would have a method that handles keyboard events, that handles gamepad events, and then it's all processed in one place and kind of mapped to something else. So there could be, let's say, input publisher. So the input publisher is it would be like a combined publisher, right? Like combined can process these events that come in and then output a different stream of events, like a normalized stream, which is game input event. And then the game input event is something that, you know, each scene in the game can handle, and it would be, and the difference is that here, like keyboard can be like, you know, space bar pressed, right? A gamepad could be like button A pressed. Touch could be like swipe down, for example. Maybe not. To be honest, I don't really know how I'll handle the touch input, and that's an exercise for later. When everything is kind of wired up, then I can experiment with different like control schemes and ways to actually control the pieces. But just technically, just how the events flow through, it would be like a swipe down, for example, a space bar on keyboard, button A on the gamepad, and then what we would emit here is like fast fall event, for example, right? So actually, probably it's not the A button on the gamepad. It would actually probably be like an arrow down, right, on the D-pad. Well, just for the sake of it. So arrow down on the gamepad, space bar, swipe down, all of it like maps to like a fast fall thing, right? Like let's underline. So these things map to this one thing. So this is what I'm thinking about, but I'm not completely sure if this would work. So let's think about it. If we actually, let's go back. We had somewhere here the drawing that we made previously about the user flow. Right? So this would be the user flow. So here, where we set up the game in the first scene, this is where we could create the input publisher, hook to input events. Well, okay, actually hooking to input events would happen in every scene, so there will be something to reuse. So we probably need a base scene that handles all of this, and then we pass through from scene to scene. We pass the publisher, and then the scene would send events send raw events into this publisher, and this publisher would do the processing there. So Okay, so the actual processing part. Okay. So probably we would pass like the simple publisher from the first scene throughout every other scene. So we just pass it on, but this is where we create it. So the first scene we created here, and then we wait for something, and then we wait until a button is pressed. And we don't really care about which event it is. We just care for a event. And actually we need more metadata here, because in the first scene we want to be able to map, if you're using a gamepad, a game controller, we want to know which one to map to the first player, right? So the first, if you have two game controllers paired to a device, and you press A on one of them, then that's player one. So we need to know more than just the game event. All right, so let's go back a bit. Let's go back a bit to this drawing. So what do we need to get? What is the information? Required info. All right, beautiful. So game event. So this is like, fall, left, right, rotate, whatever, left, right, rotate, etc. Oh, I could not, etc. All right, so that's number one. Number two, we need to know what, we need to know information about the originating, like who sent this. We need some kind of, what sent this, what sent this. Touch, keyboard, gamepad, and we need some kind of metadata with this, because it's not enough to know which gamepad did this. But it's not enough to know that a gamepad did this, but we need to know which gamepad did this. Metadata. For example, which gamepad. Okay, so this is what the publisher is actually going to send us, right? So here, so let's limit this. This is what we will publish. Published info. Okay. So now that we know this, we can associate the first player with the red gamepad. We can set, we can say, we can set the player index on the controller. And to be honest, I cannot think of any other piece of information we might need off the top of my mind. So let's go back a bit to the previous image and let's see if we could kind of like walk through the flow with this scheme. So here in the first scene here, press a button. Here we initiate the publisher, and then we wait for a signal. If we receive information that it's a controller, we somewhere map the controller to the player. I guess we just set the player index, and then we can always look up the right controller based on the player index. And an interesting idea actually is this. So if we show later in the game, the idea was that here during the game, on the left is the game screen, but if you click a button that opens the menu, if you click pause or something, then you see instructions. And in the instructions, what are you going to say? You can say press spacebar to have the piece fall down really quickly. But if you're not, if you're using touch, you would actually need to say swipe down. And now, based on the information that we're getting about the originating, like what originates input events for the main player, we can show these instructions specific to that. Specific to player one's input device from input publisher. Oh my god. All right. It's tricky to write, but it's not about writing. It's about thinking through this flow. So let's go back a bit. So here we wait for something, and then we go to the next one. Now, also interesting, if you're using a gamepad or the keyboard, then you need some kind of focus indicators, right? Like you need to show which one is currently selected. But this is not relevant if you're using touch. Focus indicators if player one using keyboard or gamepad. So this is pretty neat because we get this information for free. Our input publisher is going to say what we get, and we can associate that information with the player. And then if the player is using a controller, we can show like a focus indicator that goes up and down. If not, if it's on an iPad, then we do not. Then we don't need that. And I like that. This is pretty cool. All right. So now we select, for example, online, because this is the most, I think it's the longest flow. So let's say we click on online. We click like a game input event, like on the controller we click A translates to like game input event confirm or okay. We go to the next scene. It's the GameKit matchmaking view. So this would be provided by Apple, and I guess this should match whatever we're using. Like this should be, I'm gonna assume that this would be usable with a controller, because if not, then it's not usable. Then we cannot use this. I hope it is. Probably is. Should be. So here we should have no issues. This is Apple. Apple knows what's happening on their platforms. After the match has been made, we go to the lobby. So again, on the lobby, we know that player number one is in charge. Input indicators, which there will be some kind of like focus for keyboards and gamepads. Player one, ready or not, up and down, focus. Okay, cool. So at this point, if some other player presses something, then we associate that player. We have like a GameKit player object, associate that with their controls. If this is local, if it's online, then we don't associate anything. Then we just like move on. And again, like what do we need? What do we need to do? We need input events for up, down, left, right, approve. So this, yeah, actually, like event down, like we cannot have an event fall fast. We need an event down, because if you want to select focus, if you want the focus to go from difficulty to game mode, it's not really a fall down action, it's like a down action. So I was trying to be too fancy, I guess. It doesn't really make sense. So just keep it simple, up, down, left, right, and then ready or not. How do you set that? I guess you just like, maybe let's add a button here at the bottom. All right, so no, actually I think this should be a button. This should be a button because no, so there cannot be a button. So if it's local, then we will want multiple people to be able to set ready or not, and we don't want 4 buttons We just want input events from something. So just like, you know, maybe there's gonna be like UI that says, oh, I switched something. This is what this is the thing. So yeah, basically to be ready, like click on something, and again we can specify what needs to happen based on the input. So if it's touch input, we can say like swipe somewhere. Honestly, for touch, it would be cool if there was an input button. So if you're using touch, then presumably, how do you mark yourself as ready if you're using touch? You can click on your avatar, I guess, your player character to mark it as ready. So it's gonna be tricky to like have all of these UI indications, right? Because we want different UI indications based on your input method. But we'll cross that when I get to that. But just conceptually, like, it should be possible. If you're using touch, you click on your face or a button. If you're using a gamepad controller, you I don't know, like click B or X or Y or whatever. Like I need to double check what other games are doing. And if you are using okay, let's keep this simple. Actually, let's do this. So all of these are buttons, and player one needs to click on this button somehow. So either using the focus indicator to go up and click A on the controller, or you tap it directly if you're using touch. And for everybody else, either they set it with their local input devices, if it's an online match, or if it's a local match, then you're using controllers. So a local match is only going to work with controllers for non-first players. And in that case, it's the only thing you can set. You can click A and mark yourself as ready, click A again, you're not ready. And that's it. That's all you can do. And should be fine. Okay. Buttons. So these are buttons. Okay, so then after lobby, everybody's ready. We go naturally to the game. So here we need left, right, up, down, some kind of button to rotate, some kind of button to like do like a fast move left to right. But basically, it's fine. So one thing I'm wondering is, does every scene need and every input, or do we need to filter input events somehow? But actually, I don't think so. I think we can map everything in the publisher, and there needs to be nothing fancy. And then the scene, each scene can just listen to the events and do whatever it needs to do based on those events. I think it should be possible. All right, let's go back a bit. Let's go back to the other drawing. Okay, so one tricky thing could be with touch is if we're not relying just on taps and swipes, but we need some kind of area. So on on a scene, you might have areas in which you need to swipe or in which you need to tap, and based on that, you get different outputs, right? Like if you tap at the top, maybe you move faster than if you tap on the bottom, something like that. I don't know if that makes sense from a game UI point of view, but technically it seems like something to account for. So could we do that? I guess we could if there's going to be an underlying implementation in the scene that handles the touches. And so every scene can kind of decide which touch events to pass on to the input publisher. But the input publisher would not know about the areas of where these touch events happen. So actually, the input publisher is just a dumb publisher. It's just a dumb combined thing is like a subject. It's like a current sign, a current value subject. It's just something that, it's just a regular subject. You send it events, it's going to pass them on. And every scene is responsible for translating this stuff. So, scenes responsible for, this is not how you write R, for translating to game input event. All right. Again, it's not very beautiful how I write, but the idea makes sense, I think. And so for every scene we can reuse, we can have a base scene that handles all of this for us, and then we have the flexibility for overriding that default behavior if we need to change something. So if there is a scene that for some reason needs to change how these raw input events get mapped, then we can always do it in that scene. So it would be specific to a single scene. So actually it's responsible for that and that and that. So it comes from there. So the scene feeds stuff in the input publisher. But now it's kind of weird because each scene is doing this mapping anyway, and then it kind of feeds it into the input publisher and then feeds it out. So my initial idea was that each scene would just subscribe to a stream of input events and then handle them. But if it is already doing this translation of touches and keyboard events to game input events, then honestly the input publisher is just like redundant. Like you don't need it. You don't need it. So is there any situation where I might need multiple listeners on these events? So it's not just the scene listening for something, but multiple things. So, okay, let's go back a bit to the previous image of the entire flow. And so here, if we have the menu open in the game, then we have probably the actual game scene in the background. And so in this case, we have. Okay, so this is an interesting question. I don't really know if this would be a separate scene, and could we even show the previous scene in the background if we wanted to? Or would this be a modification of like a different state of the gameplay scene that just shows the menu and nothing is progressing? Ideally, this could be a separate scene. And if it's a separate scene, then it doesn't really matter for us to have multiple listeners. If it's the same scene, then we might want to have something handle the menu that's listening to the events. But again, like that could be, like that seems like a very specific use case to this scene. Yeah, at this point, I don't see the value of having the publisher. So I guess I got too eager of using Combine, but actually I don't see how it makes sense. The one thing that could make sense is to kind of to have a stream of. No, it doesn't really make sense currently. So we don't really need an input publisher. Let's remove this. There's going to be no input publisher. But there is going to be the game input event. So that thing stays in. Game input event. So scenes handle input. Each of these scenes. Oh no, sorry, this is the wrong way. So touch, keyboard, gamepad events happen. They go to scenes, and then scenes kind of like generate a thing and then call it back. So every scene is going to get the raw input events. There's going to be a base implementation. that generates a game input event, and then there's going to be a method that each scene can override, which is like handle this game input event. So it's like an abstraction on top of the Apple's abstractions for input, where we basically just normalize stuff, and instead of handling in every scene like different methods separately, we just say handle this one game input event thing. So it's actually very simple. I made it very complicated, but it's actually very, 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 very simple. And then down the line, if there, depending on how it goes, maybe once I start working on this, I see the opportunity to add more complexity. Like there's a good reason for more complexity, then we can always add that. Like this seems very self-contained, and this does not seem like a decision that would be, you know, hard to reverse or like have big implications. This is a good first try. If it works, it's great. If it doesn't work, I'll revisit. It's gonna be fine. But I like it. It's simple enough in the end. And what I like best is that we identified that it's not enough to know what happened, like if you want to go left, right, up, or down, but you want to know also where this came from, and that has UI implications. And I think this is a really cool idea, because it's just that nice polish for the UI, right? Where if you're using a gamepad controller, you don't see instructions for the keyboard, or you're not forced to switch instructions to see like something that's relevant for you, but like we just show it automatically. And it's a very minor thing. It's not, like, as we can see, it's not a huge thing. It's not hard to do technically, and so on. But I think, like, as a user, I would like to see this. And I think there's precedent also for this, like in Stadia. If you use Stadia and you use a keyboard, then you get one set of UI, and then if you use a gamepad, you get a different set of UI. So this is actually very simple to what, very similar to what is done on Stadia. All right, I think that's it for now. I think I have a good idea of what I want to try doing with input, and so next steps would be to add this game input event layer, and then revisit the falling piece that I added last time and add rotation. So you press a button, it rotates the piece, and then let's see how it goes from there. All right, and that's it for